and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
I'm Andy.
I'm Ann Northrup.
Welcome back, Ann.
Thanks. Thanks to Chris Cooper for sitting in for me and doing such a great job when you guys were just snowed under, so to speak.
We were.
With news.
And, you know, by Sunday I thought, it's going to be a slow news week. Let's have a guest or something. But here we go. Once again, off to the races.
Exactly. Starting in Alabama, where the Supreme Court is engaging in massive resistance to the federal court's order to legalize same-sex marriage. The Alabama court has ordered county probate judges to cease licensing same-sex marriages.
But in Nebraska, a federal judge ruled that the ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional.
And if you thought marriage was all there was, it goes on. Texas is the latest state to try to ban local LGBT rights laws, undoing protections for more than 7 million people in Texas, compliments of a Republican bigot who happens to have a gay activist son.
Can't be very happy. Anti-gay legislation also advanced in North Carolina, West Virginia, and Oklahoma, and probably some other places by the time you watch this. There are more than 30 such bills in 12 states.
Just in case you thought we had achieved victory. That's a book reference. Charlotte, North Carolina, narrowly defeated its proposed LGBT rights ordinance, and Springfield, Missouri is going to vote on whether to repeal theirs on April 7th.
A suspect is finally indicted in the 2013 killing of Transwoman Islan Nettles in Harlem.
And gay pioneer Reverend Malcolm Boyd has died at the age of 91.
Slovenia has opened marriage and adoption to same-sex couples, while Russia tries to stop the UN from providing spousal benefits for their gay employees.
James Lacine, who wrote the Academy Award-winning film Trevor, which then became the start of the Trevor Project, has an exciting new solo show about a gay youth in a small town. Andy will review that.
So, will we start in Alabama this week?
I guess so. Well, here's the deal. You know, a federal judge, Judge Grenade, ordered same-sex marriage to begin in Alabama, declared their law against same-sex marriage unconstitutional.
And by this week, almost all the counties were doing it.
Well, a good 2/3 of them, maybe a little more than that, after some hesitation and confusion. And meanwhile, the Alabama Judge Roy Moore was screaming and kicking and yelling. And we told you about how Judge Grenade's order really only applied to one probate judge, but her order warned judges around the state that if they didn't get on board with this, they were subject to more lawsuits and more declarations by the federal court that they had to do it.
And some of them said, why spend the legal fees? Let's just do it.
Exactly. They started to get on board in a repetition of what had happened in Florida. Same thing happened there. And in fact, Judge Grenade had used language from the Florida judge's decision to explain the situation to the Alabama judges. So we thought, okay, they hesitated, but it's all slowly rolling out, and marriages are beginning to happen for same-sex couples in Alabama.
But there was a case brought by some right-wing groups who we suspect Roy Moore was collaborating with, because he did recuse himself from this decision by the Supreme Court of Alabama.
Yeah, I think collaboration is probably a euphemism from forcing.
Well, you know, it's a suspect case in terms of did these groups really have standing to even bring it. Yes. But 6 justices concurred that the state law that limited marriage to man-woman couples is operable, and probate judges cannot issue licenses to gay couples.
Well, this goes back to the technicalities of federal Judge Grenade's decision. Her decision technically applied only to one probate judge. And then another judge was sued, so she extended her order to him too. But that's only 2 out of more than 70 probate judges. So technically, the Alabama Supreme Court is exactly right in saying that it has the power to say to the rest of the probate judges, you may not issue these licenses. We are stopping this until there is a blanket decision, perhaps from the U.S. Supreme Court.
What about the one that was ordered to do so by Judge Grenade?
I think both of them, both the 2 judges, are still under Grenade's order to open up marriage licenses and weddings to same-sex couples. Although, at the moment, as we're taping, no licenses are being issued to same-sex couples in Alabama.
What about the couples who've already been married? Is the state going to try to say that they don't have to recognize those?
Well, that would only make them like Governor Brownback in Kansas, who's trying to do that. But generally what has happened in these cases, and we've seen it in Michigan, we've seen it in Utah, we've seen it all over the place, if you have been legally married, even in a short window of opportunity, your marriage is a legal marriage and should be treated as such. Whether the state will have to be forced to treat it as such is another question.
As we know, in Texas, the one same-sex marriage that was allowed to take place, the Attorney General there is trying to stop recognition of it.
Exactly.
Trying to avoid it.
So that's going to be an ongoing legal battle. The Alabama Supreme Court, though, went beyond its order to the probate judges not to issue licenses or perform marriages. They then went into a second part, which was their analysis of the constitutionality of their state ban on same-sex marriage versus the federal government's and federal courts' ability to declare that state law unconstitutional. Now, in essence, what they had to say at some length has no lasting power. It's not a real decision. They are defending their reading of the constitutionality of their state law, but ultimately the Supreme Court will decide and has the power to decide. They went into a whole thing about states' rights and states' right to define marriage. But as we've said again and again, yes, and the Supreme Court has said the states have a right to define marriage, but within certain boundaries. Yes. They may not define it in discriminatory ways. So
and the Alabama court said, we're not engaging in sex discrimination. All men and women can get married. You just have to marry opposite-sex partners.
I am so sick of this little clever analysis that these courts engage in, or the attorneys general, or
well,
whatever.
I mean, now, Roy Moore, the Chief Justice, has said, I will have to, I don't like it, but I will have to abide by the U.S. Supreme Court decision when it comes down.
Right.
But there has been a bill introduced in Alabama to allow religious organizations, including social service organizations,
hospitals,
not to recognize same-sex marriage. Well, including hospitals, not just for employees, but when you want to go visit your spouse in the hospital, although that's in contravention of federal law.
Exactly, which says the Health and Human Services Department rules now say that if you accept Medicaid money from the federal government, you must not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity.
How are you going to get along without that Medicaid money in Alabama?
Well, the lawyers are going to make a lot of money on an ongoing basis on these cases. And it is not a surprise that states would be resisting this change, which, after all, has come cascading pretty quickly. And all this is at least being sorted out in court rather than on the back roads of Alabama. But although I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility, but this is going to seesaw back and forth for a while.
Right. And the Supreme Court, of course, is getting ready for its big case, and our side's briefs were filed this past week. Lambda, ACLU, an Ohio-based private firm, all are trying to address these 14th Amendment cases in cases from Kentucky, Michigan, Tennessee, and Ohio. And that's what's going to decide it.
Still no decision, though, about who is going to stand up and argue these cases before the Supreme Court.
One for each question, the recognition of out-of-state.
Two questions posed. Right. So 2 from our side, 2 from the resistant side, 1 on each of the questions on each side. There are a variety of amicus briefs cascading in, including one organized by Republican, recently out gay Ken Mellman, former Bush administration spokesman or
well,
worker.
campaign manager.
Campaign manager, thank you.
The year Bush ran on an anti-gay marriage amendment.
Yeah, so there are a raft of Republicans signed on, including all the big money types who are still out there electing all these right-wing Republicans. Paul Singer, David Koch.
God, are you trying to drive me away from support of same-sex marriage?
It's a strange day when we find ourselves in bed
No,
with
it's
David
about
Koch.
preservation of capital marriages, partly.
Or their gay children's happiness, whatever.
No.
It is a libertarian point of view.
Some people are not concerned about their gay children's happiness. Well, we'll get to that later, actually, when we talk about gay news. But we got a great decision in Nebraska this week.
Well, no, I think we can talk about the Texas representative because he.
We'll get two of them. Well,
okay.
First, we've got State Representative Tony Tinderholt. We have a picture of him there.
Somewhere.
He tried to swear out a complaint against a state district judge, the same-sex marriage decision, but he got the judge wrong and the case wrong, and it turns out that at age 44, take a look at him, he himself has been married 5 times. He's been busy.
So what?
Yeah. So this guy cares about the sanctity of marriage and all this moral stuff.
No one said anything
like that.
about the sanctity of marriage.
They talk about it all the time.
It's about, quote him on the sanctity of marriage.
It is about getting reelected and raking in campaign funds from right-wingers. All right? That's what it's about.
It's about hypocrisy.
That's all we're saying.
Yes. So, but in his terms, you could marry 20 times. So what? You're marrying women.
That's right. And that's what God wants you to do. But God only wants you to do it once in some religions.
Yeah, but even they will give annulments for enough money.
Well, the other Texas story was a bill introduced a la Tennessee and Arkansas, to ban all local human rights laws that cover more than the state does. So you have LGBT rights protected in Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, Fort Worth, Houston, and Plano. 7.5 million people are covered by these laws. And the chief sponsor is Representative Rick Miller, a Republican from Sugar Land, who has an out gay and HIV positive son, Bo Miller, who's an attorney and a gay and AIDS activist, who says he is, quote, extremely disappointed in his dad's move.
Yeah, we are too. But we are not disappointed in the federal judge in Nebraska,
Joseph Bataillon,
who has struck down the Nebraska ban on same-sex marriage as unconstitutional. And this is supposed to legalize and allow to take effect legal same-sex marriages starting next week, March 9th, unless the Attorney General and Governor's appeal to the 8th Circuit gets a stay in effect.
And that 8th Circuit also includes Arkansas, Iowa, where they already have it, Minnesota, where they already have it, Missouri, where they have it a little bit, South Dakota, and North Dakota.
Yeah, Arkansas, South Dakota, and maybe Missouri already have cases pending at the 8th Circuit.
We're waiting on North Dakota. What do you say?
They're working on it. Meanwhile, in another good move, the governor of Nebraska says that his Department of Health and Human Services will stop barring gay foster and adoptive parents. They still need to make some change to the official rules, but that's a nice progressive step forward for the governor of Nebraska.
But there was a not nice thing in Nebraska, in Omaha, this past week, and we have a videotape about it.
Well, a crazy guy got a little carried away.
Reminder that the hate is still out there.
You'll find anything but hate behind these walls. As wind dances over these chimes and allows this flag to flutter, few would think hate as they look at Ariane and Jess Meadows Anderson. But this flag is new because the original was stolen and burnt Sunday morning.
Strange. Very strange. It goes beyond being vandalism or theft, or that's a direct attack.
Police say 23-year-old Cameron Mayfield, seen here, stole the flag, set it on fire, and ran through the neighborhood. His father tells me Mayfield recently lost his job, had been drinking that night, adding, It's not like him to do something like this. It was a surprise to the Andersons because Mayfield lives just down the road. You can actually see the new gay pride flag from where his van is parked.
You almost feel bad for a minute. You know, he's a young man, and he, you know, made a hate-filled, drunken mistake that's going to have a lasting impact on his life.
Meanwhile, the Andersons are trying to focus back on their own lives. Married in Iowa back in 2011, the two are anxiously awaiting a local judge's decision that could allow them to get married in their own state. Until then, they have no plans to take down the flag. Instead, they tell me they'll ignore the hate.
It's just the fact that it still exists.
And hope for some better news. Tonight, it is not good news for Mayfield. We're joining you live from downtown outside the jail. That's where Mayfield is tonight. His father tells me he'll stay there till he has his next hearing. His father also tells me he doesn't think his son was trying to be hateful, that it was just a coincidence that what he stole and burned was that gay pride flag. He also adds that he thinks his son's first action upon leaving jail will be to apologize to those two women. That remains to be seen. Reporting live from downtown Omaha, I'm Matthew Smith with photographer M.H. Denker, WOWT6 News.
Mayfield charged with second-degree felony arson and resisting arrest.
Police say when they first made contact with him, he tried to run and then struggled with officers.
The booze made me do it. The booze made me do it. But why did it make you do it to the rainbow flag and to the lesbians?
I just like seeing the lesbians be sweet and understanding.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Back to marriage news. In North Carolina, the legislature is advancing a bill to tell local officials that they don't have to license or perform marriages that offend their religious beliefs.
This passed 32-16. They have, if they want to go this way, they have to stop all marriages for 6 months, and then the elected Register of Deeds and the chief district court judge would have to carry out their duties if necessary. How about just making all government employees do their jobs?
Yeah,
please?
It strikes me that they're not going to get away with this. This is going to be...
It's been a conflict all over the world where we have same-sex
But
marriage.
there's a vehicle in which all of this can continue and people will not be inconvenienced?
I don't know.
But they can keep their jobs. That's the real thing.
The National Organization for Marriage, the anti-gay group, their appeal to the Supreme Court about hiding their donors was rejected. So are we going to finally see the four people who give them their money?
That would be so nice. And then we can have Fred Karger come back here for a big confetti celebration.
Because he's been writing this case for a long time.
And West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat, is the only Democrat in the U.S. Senate who will not sign on to the pro-same-sex marriage brief that the Democrats in Congress are sending to the Supreme Court. Very disappointing. Same-sex marriage is now legal in his state. We don't know of any problems that's caused, but he is standing firm with his...
I remember when after the gay rights bill had passed in New York, they asked Rudy Giuliani if he supported it, and he said no.
Well, at least he's a Republican.
Yeah.
Creep, but a Republican.
Yeah.
Joe Manchin's supposed to be a Democrat.
Well, there was sort of good news, well, good and bad news also out of West Virginia itself, not directly related to marriage. This is one of those stop the localities bills from having civil rights laws.
Yeah.
It did pass the House committee by a 16-8 vote, but would affect 5 cities there. But on Friday, the Senate leader, Mitch Carmichael, a Republican, said that there is no way that the Senate would consider it.
Maybe we should elect more Republicans from West Virginia rather than Democrats.
Don't say that.
I'm sorry, I'm being facetious.
Right.
Don't take me at my word.
Democrats are bad enough.
Bad news out of the Veterans Administration in Washington. It seems to me we've heard about this case before. It's getting worse. So they're a lesbian couple in the military, transferred to Texas some years ago. They, by the military, they're forced to live in Texas. Then I think they retire from the military. They're still living in Texas. They go to Washington State, which is the home of the parents of one of them. They get married there. They go back to their home in Texas. One of them is receiving disability benefits from the military, and she applies for spousal benefits for her wife and child. And is told she can't have them because Texas can't doesn't recognize their marriage, but the Veterans Administration screws up and pays her the benefits anyway, the extra benefits for the spouse. Now, the Veterans Administration has discovered its mistake, so-called, and is demanding repayment of all the overpayment of benefits because they say Texas still does not recognize their marriage, and they're demanding the money back.
Sue them.
And they're withholding the disability payments that are due until the overpayment is repaid.
Can't the Justice Department step in, or the administration step in?
This is the craziness of the current transitional situation where we don't have marriage rights nationally yet, so states can make their own rules, and the federal government is going back and forth, department by department, on some will recognize all marriages no matter where you live, others will only recognize it if you live in a marriage legal state. But it seems to me if the military has transferred you to a state where it's not recognized, the federal government should take responsibility for that.
And some of it has to do with the way the administration would say, the way the law is written. And if you don't change the law, Congress has to do that, and it's not going to happen.
But the administration has been amending regulations. For instance, they just did it with Social Security survivor benefits, I think, to get up to date with this. So it's hard for me to imagine that they can't get around that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the latest out of Michigan is that Republicans in a House committee there have passed a religious freedom bill for adoption agencies. Whereas we have succeeded in getting discriminatory adoption agencies delicensed elsewhere, now in Michigan they have a right to discriminate all they want.
Okay.
All right. Other...
I just forgot to put the pic. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot to put that down.
Okay. Well, other political news.
How about that Jeb Bush? You know,
are we going to CPAC?
Lots of gays on his campaign staff, but at CPAC he said he does not support their right to marry. He told Sean Hannity, "I believe in traditional marriage." Even the Human Rights Campaign, which had gone soft on him, has criticized him for that.
The Log Cabin Republicans staged their annual big fight to get involved in the CPAC conference. They were once again rejected as sponsors of the conference. I can't weep over that too much, but they did get their executive director on one panel discussion on Russia, and he did a good job of blasting the Russian law against homosexual propaganda and all the consequences of that. Yeah, but it's discouraging to see. You know, it's one thing for them to be part of the Republican Party. It's another thing for them to be hanging out with CPAC and the Tea Partiers. And they got themselves, the Log Cabin in California got themselves certified as a legitimate group by the California Republican Convention. While the California Republican platform disapproves of any education around homosexuality in the schools, any partner benefits to same-sex partners, any adoption by same-sex couples.
But will they oppose the proposed ballot referendum? Somebody's already paid the $200 to file it. That proposes the death penalty for gay people, literally. It is, this is what the Bible calls for, and that's what this referendum is calling for.
This is proposed by some guy named Matt McLaughlin in California. It turns out in California, if you pay $200, you can propose any ballot referendum you like. There is no rules, no analysis.
This is America.
Nothing. Well, you then have the right to go out and try to collect signatures. 5% of the vote in the previous gubernatorial election, he has to collect 365,000 signatures, I think, for the Sodomite Suppression Act to appear on the ballot in California. And here's his analysis. God is going to kill us all because gay people are getting rights like same-sex marriage. So it is important that we kill gay people, literally, kill, shoot and kill gay people before God kills all the rest of us.
Why don't you just focus on your eternal life? You know, because we're all going to die.
Also, his act would jail anybody who helps gay people or supports gay people's rights.
Sounds like Uganda or something.
Almost worse. I don't think even Uganda is supporting, we talk about it as the Kill the Gays bill, but I don't think they're going for random shooting in the streets, although some people won't interpret it that way. But this could appear on the ballot in California if he gets enough signatures.
Well, let's give them some good news. Well, the good news from Idaho, and we have a picture of this, is that 23 people that were activists were arrested in the House and Senate chambers over the blocking of the sexual orientation, gender identity bill. I mean, they stood there in the chambers, they got themselves arrested because the bill had been rejected. Good on you, and that's the kind of thing that's going to eventually bring this thing about.
You know, they had a long campaign like this, and they finally got the legislature to hold a hearing, but then the legislature killed the bill, so they're back at their demonstrations, their civil disobedience. And congratulations to the guy in Duval City, Florida. A gay man was called to jury duty, but he stood up and objected to serving on the jury because the clerk of the court has stopped doing all marriages in Duval City because he, has his religious objections. And this guy said, I am not comfortable serving on a jury in this courthouse when the clerk of the court is refusing to do same-sex marriages or any marriages because of who I am.
Right.
And he was excused from jury duty. He was prepared to go to jail for it, but he was simply excused from jury duty.
Some decent news from Arkansas, where we were lost on the business of passing a bill that would ban gay rights laws. But the religious freedom bill there failed in committee. Walmart came out in opposition to it and said it was sending the wrong message about our state, which you've already sent with the other bill. But that one looks like it may, it failed in committee. They can still try to bring it up.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, there was a big fight over a proposal to pass a non-discrimination bill including sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. 100 people showed up at the city council meeting to testify for and against it. It was a big fight, and the city council eventually, late at night, voted it down 6-5. But
despite removing a provision that let transgender people, use bathrooms with which they identify, which of course they need to do and should do, but that upset some of the sponsors of the bill.
Well, they took it out.
That's right.
They deleted it. You didn't quite say deleted. They deleted that protection, and so 2 of the people who voted against the bill were people who wanted that in the bill.
Right. And you know what? It's really not worth having equal rights bills that aren't equal rights bills.
In Oregon, the legislature is considering a ban on conversion therapy for minors. And in Oklahoma, the legislature is considering protection of conversion therapy for minors.
And yet, Psychology Today, which ran ads for conversion therapists, this actually just today, said they're going to stop listing those practitioners because HRC got on their backs and stopped them.
Yeah. Everyone got very teary-eyed about the retirement announcement by Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland this week.
I didn't. Did I miss that? Yeah. No, I know she's retiring, but I didn't get teary-eyed because she's a big closet case all those years. And she voted for the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996, disgracefully. And then somebody put a sign on her door says, "Try this again, and you're gone. We're going to expose you." Which she would have deserved. Now, she's the longest-serving woman in the history of Congress.
Yes,
apparently.
And she's done a number of good things in the Senate, and she helped, after all those years, pass the Maryland same-sex marriage legalization. But it was, that's a war criminal who votes for DOMA.
Sad.
And
Chuck Schumer, our senator, did it too.
In the House, yes. A number of us confronted her at Barnes & Noble shortly after that vote, when a lot of senators shortly after that vote happened to be on book tours, came to New York, were at Barnes & Noble's, and we had several occasions to go confront them personally. And Barbara Mikulski was there at Barnes & Noble in Chelsea, of all places, right after voting for the Defense of Marriage Act. And so I stood up and said, how dare you, as a closeted lesbian, vote for the Defense of Marriage Act?
She got Bill Bradley, too.
Yeah, but Mikulski ran out of the room. And Bradley was not a closet case, to my knowledge, and he became friendly and apologized.
Then we both went to see that West Virginia guy. What's his name?
Rockefeller?
No, the other one. Byrd.
Yes.
And I ended up having to yell at him.
Well,
in front of Hillary Clinton, who was introducing him.
Yeah. And I got Lieberman.
Sometimes people need to be yelled at when they do, when they're bigoted.
Yes.
You know, they need to. People need to see how you feel about things. Sometimes it's all well and good being polite and negotiating and all those kinds of things, but
we do that too.
Yeah, sure. We're capable of it.
We've told you about the various things going on in Texas. There's also a new coalition of progressives and business people and academics and activists called Texas Wins that is going to fight this expansion of discrimination in Texas. Glad to see that people are organizing and standing up.
Did we talk about the Florida anti-transgender bill?
No.
It would require those using single-sex facilities like a restroom or a locker room and things like that to prove your gender or be, and if you go into the quote-unquote wrong one, be arrested. And it overrides any local laws that might protect you. This is so disgusting.
And there are several other states that are proposing that too. They are on the warpath. You think we're doing well. We are doing well in many ways, but the right wing is fighting back. They are not going away quietly.
And my hope is that it will make all of you and all of us fight back. And I think it is activating people around the country.
Well, I love these individual acts of courage. I love the guy in Florida who stands up and doesn't want to do jury duty. I love all of this, and I'm thrilled that people have enough self-respect and courage to stand up and do that.
Well, somebody who stood up for us for many years was Reverend Malcolm Boyd. He was a sort of prophetic Episcopal priest who came. We have a picture of him and his husband, Mark Thompson.
Malcolm on the left.
Malcolm, yeah. He came out, he was already quite famous when he came out in 1976 because he'd written all these books about making God cool. Are You Running With Me, Jesus? And he preached in cafes and things like that. And
well, he was a Hollywood PR guy for years. He worked with Mary Pickford.
Yes, he did. He predicted that the church would be out of business in 20 years if it didn't change back in the 60s, and, you know, some of it is.
He also marched in Selma in 1965 with Martin Luther King and was heavily involved in the civil rights movement.
He wrote 30 books, became president of PEN, the big writers group, and
big anti-war activist against the Vietnam War. 91, severe pneumonia, quite a heroic and prominent guy. Malcolm
But not
Boyd.
everything is good in the world of religion. At Erskine College in South Carolina, which is associated with the Reformed Presbyterian Church, 2 athletes came out of the closet and church members complained, so the board voted to ban sex not based on marriage. Got that?
A lot of people try to do that, those Christian colleges. And in Missouri, the Assembly of God has gathered signatures for a referendum on April 7th to repeal the non-discrimination law in Springfield, Missouri, the capital there.
I hope I don't have this on the list, but I hope the control room can find this image of Isla Nettles. This is the transgender woman who was there she is. She was killed 18 months ago in Harlem, and it was a very confused case about who did it. 8 young men surrounded her and a friend. One of them punched her in the face. She fell, and then they started kicking her on the ground, etc.
Beating her in the head, pounding her head into the pavement.
They arrested one guy, and then they had to let him go because they didn't feel that they could prove it. So they finally indicted a guy named James Dixon, who was a suspect all along, charged him with manslaughter and assault. He's 24 years old. They said the delay was due to how exhaustive the investigation was. It is not being classified as a hate crime because they don't know what was said beforehand, although it seems like that. What else about this case?
Well, we for a long time, after the DA saying, what's happening, you got to arrest someone. And finally they have, and they've had him indicted, so that's a good thing.
Right. Staying in New York, the fire department has its first out lesbian chaplain, Reverend Ann Cansfield, the pastor of the Greenfield Reformed Church in Brooklyn.
First woman chaplain.
I know. Now, of course, the first out gay was Michael Judge, who was out to many people and out to the fire commissioner.
But not out publicly in the way this one is.
Yeah, I mean, Anne is an activist. I mean, she's only 39, but I seem to remember her from 20 years ago in terms of activism.
We know activists who were kids doing it in their teens.
Like Kate Barnhart.
Yes, exactly. But congratulations to her. Congratulations to .gay, which is the organization trying to win the right to an internet address, literally .gay as opposed to .com or whatever. And they're a community-based group, and at first they were rejected by the international body, but they have won an appeal to be re-examined, so we'll continue to follow their status.
And we have some good news about the St. Patrick's Day Parade. No, they're not letting an Irish LGBT group march, but the mayor now has announced that he appreciates the fact that allowing an NBC corporate gay group in is just too small a step to lift the boycott. So he's going to stick by the boycott, although apparently working very hard with people like Councilmember Danny Drum and others to try to get an Irish LGBT group in this parade and get this thing over with. Did we run that? Yeah, there's a picture of a demonstration from a couple of years ago. These were just kids who came along the street who heard what was happening and picked up the sign and said, of course you should be able to march.
Yeah, this has been going on for more than 25 years. And so the deal is that the very right-wing St. Patrick's Day Parade organizers here in New York have always refused to let an Irish LGBT group march.
With its banner.
Yeah, with its self-identifying banner. Last year they announced that they would let in the NBC LGBT employee group, but really that's just a way for them to keep NBC broadcasting the parade. They had lost a couple of major sponsors last year over this, and the mayor had refused to march.
And the beer companies dropped out last year, but Guinness, so anxious to get back in, said, oh, they're making progress, so we're back in.
Yeah, but we have done a good job, I think, of educating the public and the politicians and everyone that this is a sham fix, and that really still the authentically Irish LGBT groups need to be invited in. So,
and when we say we educated people, we mean each other. I mean, we're in a small group of people that is trying to keep this alive until it's fixed.
Yeah. So it could still be fixed this year. They're still carrying on fervent negotiations behind the scenes. But if it's not fixed, then the city council is staying out, the mayor is staying out, and we will again have a demonstration on Fifth Avenue between 56th and 57th Street. We're making banners as we speak, and there will be a demonstration. So stay tuned. We'll keep you informed.
11 o'clock in the morning.
Meanwhile, the Boston Parade, which was the other big holdout, has announced that they have officially invited a group of LGBT veterans into the parade. The Boston Parade is portrayed as a veterans parade overall. So this is an appropriate fix for them. The New York parade still maintains it's a Catholic parade.
So in the main Boston parade, one Catholic group has already said, oh, if homosexuals are going to be in there, we're out.
And they'll get cooties.
Which is very mean. But the other thing is there was always an alternative parade in Boston because the gays couldn't march, and they're not giving them their permit this year.
Well, they'll all have to declare themselves veteran of the activist wars and show up. Thank you to departing U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, who has appointed an out gay man, Ben Miser, to head the civil division of the Justice Department. This is a very big deal. He works at the Justice Department. He's been there in subsidiary positions for a while. He was the Solicitor General of Ohio, I assume in the previous Democratic administration. So Ben Miser will be the new head of the civil division of the Justice Department.
We can't get Loretta Lynch confirmed as our new Attorney General. She has been held up for 116 days, longer than any Attorney General nominee in history. Could it be because she is black? I mean, I'm serious. The hatred that comes out of that Republican caucus for African Americans
is
just incredible.
And it's not like Loretta Lynch is some
raving liberal.
Exactly. But, you know, mostly it's just we're going to kill everything Obama wants to do until we get some deal out of him that gives us something we want. Luckily, that they didn't get that to work on Homeland Security.
John Boehner called Benjamin Netanyahu his greatest ally in the fight against Obama.
Really?
No, that was a New Yorker.
Well, not a joke. Ben Carson, the newest we've been expecting Dr. Ben Carson to announce that he was running for president. He has announced an exploratory committee. He's
far right-winger.
Considered fringe and has been homophobic all along, but he was talking to Chris Cuomo, I think, this week after his announcement, and Chris said to him, "So do you really think being gay is a choice?" And he said, "Why, yes. You know, people go into prison straight and they come out gay. Did something happen? What do you think?" Now, I frankly didn't understand that at all.
Well, you know, this whole thing.
In prison, they would choose to be gay?
The whole right thing, as you have said, I think, thinks we are making a perverse choice. Now, we all choose our behavior, what we're going to do with our orientations.
Thus, prison.
But we have orientations. Now, I think that the reason a lot of right-wingers think it's a choice is because they're bisexual and they feel they're rejecting their homosexual feelings and trying to embrace their heterosexual feelings, and that's why they think they've made a good choice, and we've made a bad choice.
Back to the formulation you once announced but have since denied, which is that 10% of the world is exclusively heterosexual, 10% exclusively homosexual, and 80% somewhere in between.
Well, I haven't done the count lately.
But I love that when you said that, and I've quoted you ever since, and you've just denied
most of us are in between, but very few people identify as bisexual.
But what we're talking about is the capacity for attraction, not behavior, which is separate.
Now, we had a Speaker of the House in Rhode Island who was identified as gay. And
Gordon Fox.
And, well, he had to step down out of a corruption case, and he made a plea deal this week for taking a bribe and misusing more than $100,000 in campaign funds for personal expenses. He faces 3 years in prison, and it's may cost him his law license. So don't do it.
He helped get marriage equality passed in Rhode Island, but like many others, fell afoul.
Pennsylvania has a comprehensive transgender health legislation now that would end exclusion of transgender health care, require insurance companies to cover such care, including hormone therapy, mental health, and surgery. So let's all get behind that.
And see if we can pass it. I have a couple of things that you mentioned last week, but I thought needed a little elaboration. We've talked about how Tennessee passed a bill saying that localities could not pass non-discrimination laws that were greater than the state law, and that's now what's happening in other states around the country. And people have said, well, you know, that was challenged in court, but we lost, so, you know, maybe there's no way to challenge that. But Shannon Minter of the National Center for Lesbian Rights put out a note last week that explained that, in fact, in the Tennessee case, we lost because the court ruled that the plaintiffs lacked standing because they were not coming into court and saying, we have been discriminated against and therefore we can bring this case. The court said, you aren't saying that, you're just coming in generally and saying this doesn't work. But the ruling was not a ruling on the merits of the law, and there will be further challenges, and
we have to prove animus when they did it.
Yes,
and that's not as easy as it was in the Amendment 2 case.
No, because they've gotten a little smarter.
They don't name us.
But Shannon says that he thinks that ultimately the laws will be struck down as unconstitutional because whether they say it or not, they are targeting LGBT people. And I also thought you needed to put a little more emphasis on the memo that came out of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission last week that stated their analysis that sexual orientation discrimination violates Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
That's very big.
It's huge, and they said explicitly that this has been previously misinterpreted. If this holds and courts accept this analysis, we could obviate the need for a non-discrimination law federally or locally, because you could interpret the Civil Rights Act as covering sexual orientation.
If you follow me on Facebook, I say this about 5 times a day, because when we talk about all these states doing these terrible things, we need comprehensive federal stuff.
Yes.
Legislation ain't going to happen from this Congress. It could happen through these court decisions that interprets anti-gay discrimination as sex discrimination, which it is. Good report from the Obama administration on policing, calling for the gay and AIDS groups are welcoming it. End of profiling based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Good luck with that. End possession of condoms as evidence of prostitution, calling for LGBT sensitivity training all across the board. You know.
The press reports on this report have concentrated on the part of it that says that police departments have been racist. And in fact, it also includes a section on how they have been homophobic and transphobic.
And last week, I misidentified our new envoy from the State Department on LGBT stuff. He is Randy Berry, not Perry, and he was appointed by John Kerry.
That's why he got messed up. And he was sworn in this week. Okay. Should we move to international news? Because we have gone way over time on national news. So I'm just going to go down the list.
Well, the Mexico Supreme Court ordered the state of Mexico, not the country, to legalize same-sex marriage. And a couple of more rulings. It's a little unclear.
I can't keep it all straight, but it seems to be sweeping the country. But in Monterrey, Mexico, officials ordered the taking down of a poster for the normal heart because it had a picture of 2 men kissing. So there's a big kiss-in scheduled at City Hall in Monterrey, Mexico.
We got same-sex marriage in Slovenia.
Yeah.
Parliament voted 51-28 to allow that and adoption of children by gay couples. They already had civil partnerships, didn't allow adoptions. Several thousand rallied to protest the move and vow a referendum on the new law.
Yeah,
but the leftist leader there said, today Slovenia is entering the 21st century. Unlike Texas, which is trying to go back to about the 14th century.
And Kazakhstan is going back to the 12th. Their Senate has passed a law identical to Russia's forbidding homosexual propaganda. They are copying that. And you remember, we'll show you the picture again, the lesbians from St. Petersburg who found themselves seated on an airplane in front of Vitaly Milanov, who authored the no homosexual propaganda bill in Russia. So they had a little fun with kissing and had a fine time, except now the cops have raided and harassed the nightclub they own.
They're not laughing now, are they?
No,
I'm sure that's Milanov's attitude.
Well,
it reminds me out of something from V for Vendetta.
Well, here's another vendetta. Russia is demanding that the UN cancel its plans to provide benefits for same-sex spouses of UN employees. Russia's getting up in arms and saying this is going to cost us money and blah,
well, Russia is under fire at the UN because of the Ukraine. So they're fighting back, and they're threatening a vote on this gay stuff, and they're saying, you are making us pay for this, even though we don't support same-sex marriage.
Yes. There was a big conference in Bangkok, Thailand, sponsored by the UN and other organizations, a 3-day meeting for hundreds of LGBT Asians. Very successful conference. Things are moving in that part of the world. But in Cairo, Egypt, the government, after the bathhouse arrestees were acquitted, has arrested another 7 transgender women in a raid for debauchery. And the cops seem to have set this up by enticing people online to show up somewhere and then bursting in, and they set up phony web pages and arresting them. In Argentina, the first gay married couple there are now saying, well, really, we just did it for political reasons. We were friends. We were having sex. We love each other, but we weren't really.
But I heard they denied that report, so.
Well,
what the hell's the difference?
Exactly.
You get married, you're taking responsibility. 7% of all marriages are just done for benefits, by the way.
In the United Kingdom, the government is about to introduce a bill to pardon the 49,000 men convicted of gross indecency.
Oh, could we get a bill like that here on sodomy?
Well, let's see. But they believe 15,000 of them are still living. This is all coming out of the Imitation Game thing.
Harvey Weinstein campaign to get an Oscar.
And it didn't do him any good, but it may help these people.
Screenplay.
and off the pardon of Alan Turing, so that could be good. And the BBC's EastEnders show may hire a trans actor for a trans storyline. The USAID administrator says global LGBT people suffer more poverty and has issued a new toolkit to enhance LGBT rights in Eastern Europe and Eurasia. Swiss Legislative Committee has approved same-sex marriage, but they may have to go through a whole process that includes a public referendum. The Dominican Republic tourism minister doesn't want to encourage LGBT tourists. He got blasted by the out gay U.S. ambassador, Wally Brewster. And in Peru, there's a big demonstration of hundreds of people for civil unions. And in South Africa, 2 owners of a camp that's sort of a conversion therapy camp, turning boys into men, convicted of murder of a 15-year-old a couple of years ago. He was brought in for treatment when he was malnourished, dehydrated, had a broken arm, burns and wounds all over his body. Not nice.
Bad world.
Yeah. AIDS news.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the Scripps Research Institute study last week of supposedly a new, very effective vaccine against HIV. I was happy that you pointed out that it only was found to work in monkeys yet. And there have been lots of things over the years that we found worked against simian
SIV.
Yes, thank you. It's a fascinating report, but not as happy about it yet as I'd like to be.
It's a good concept.
In New York, City Councilman Corey Johnson has introduced a bill to expand benefits for impoverished people with HIV as well as people with a full AIDS diagnosis.
If you've got a full AIDS diagnosis, you get entitled to all kinds of benefits, especially like a housing cap and things like that. So he wants to make it available for people who have HIV so that they don't progress to AIDS.
Yes, exactly. And GLAAD is asking Hollywood to go back to doing more on HIV and AIDS. There's now a new AIDS storyline on How to Get Away with Murder, or there was on the last episode. Looking is about the only other show with an HIV positive character.
Yeah, and most shows don't deal with condoms during sex, etc. I think Girls does quite a bit, but a lot of shows don't. So those soap operas certainly don't.
And did you do the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces reversing the conviction of an HIV-positive serviceman for aggravated
This
assault?
was good news in HIV criminalization.
Bad news from a conference in Seattle, which says that most of the money the U.S. has spent on AIDS in Africa has been wasted because they really haven't changed behavior, blah, blah, blah.
Entertainment news.
Yes.
So, in a snowstorm this week, I went out to see James Lacine in his new play, The Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, mainly because the director, Tony Speciale, who's been a guest on with us, was very high on it, on really wanted us to see it, and he was right. This is a fantastic show. It's a solo show where he portrays all the characters in a small town dealing with a 14-year-old gay boy. And I want you to see it. I think it's only got a short run at Dixon Place, which you can look up online.
Weekends through the end of the month.
But I am sure it's going to have new life, and we're so high on it that we're going to bring Tony and James in next week to tell us all about it.
It's great. And I'm still, he goes to the intellectual things.
This is a great entertainment and a warm, thought-provoking show. You can quote me.
Thank you. I don't mean to denigrate that, but merely to contrast my fascination continuing with Empire on Fox, where Jamal has finally come out in front of his father at a big party by singing a song about man loving man.
Wow, his father knew about this all along, right?
Yeah, but hated it and didn't want him to come out.
Oh, publicly.
Yes, but he did anyway. And now his father is still furious with him.
Okay.
Fascinating-er and fascinating-er.
Now, Russell Tovey is on looking. He's the British guy with the ears.
Kevin.
Yeah. And we have a picture of him. That's from a play called The Pass, which I saw, where he played sort of a David Beckham character who's closeted. But he said this week, I could have been really effeminate if I hadn't gone to school, the school I went to, where I felt like I had to toughen up. If I'd been able to relax, prance around, sing in the street, I might be a different person now. I thank my dad for that, for not allowing me to go down that path. The whole idea, Russell, is to be ourselves. Not, I mean, you know, you
got a lot of pushback.
Oh, come on. He's a good actor.
Yeah, and then
he's out.
He was in History Boys. He has a whole thing. But he did get a lot of pushback, a lot of people who yelled at him for this, and he pretty much apologized and said, I really didn't mean to say it that way. I don't hate effeminate men. I was just simply whatever.
Okay.
And Eddie Redmayne, while we're on the subject of British actors,
yes, is going to play the Danish Girl, which is a transgender person I had not heard of, from 1931. So we're going to show you. Well, that's Eddie Redmayne and the role, but let's show you the pictures of this character who was Einar Wegener, who was a famous artist at the time, who became Lily Elby on the right there. And then we can go back to Eddie Redmayne if you want, because this is his next big role that he's going to be taking on
after winning the Best Actor Oscar for The Theory of Everything. He's taking many transformative roles.
Nicole Kidman was originally cast in this role.
Oh.
And now
so in the end, they're not casting a trans actor to play the role, which would be the desirable thing these days. But they've gone from one side to the other side, neither one of them correct.
Yeah. And I don't want to spoil the whole story because you'll go see the movie eventually, but the first surgery on this person was performed by Magnus Hirschfeld.
I didn't realize. Oh, I guess I did know Magnus Hirschfeld was a doctor, but it hadn't occurred to me that he was performing these kinds of surgeries.
He ran a sex institute.
Yeah.
All right. Out gay Jonathan Groff is taking over as George III in the Lin-Manuel Miranda hit Hamilton, about Alexander Hamilton, at the Public on March already taken over. Brian Darcy James is going into Something Rotten on Broadway. The Hamilton play, which is such a hit, is coming to Broadway in the summer. There's a new show called Clinton, the musical, about Bill and Hillary, with out-comic Judy Gold playing Eleanor Roosevelt, our lesbian first lady of the world. I don't know what that has to do with the Clintons, but...
I thought, because Eleanor Roosevelt is a big role model for Hillary. And who was it, Hillary, who said she used to talk to Eleanor Roosevelt in the White House?
I don't know. And
I think so.
And I
thought you were going to say it was going to be about George Clinton, the cross-dressing governor of New York.
All right. I saw the movie Eastern Boys, about a middle-aged gay man in Paris, played by Oliver Rabourdi, trying to pick up an Eastern European rent boy, Kirill Emelianan, getting mixed up with a thieving gang of homeless, undocumented immigrants. It's very challenging, very gripping, and I don't want to give away more than that. It's going to be at Lincoln Center through March 12th, and I'm sure it's going to be online and on, DVD and all that stuff. Eastern Boys.
Eastern Boys got a rave in the Times, too.
And a rave on Gay USA. And our colleague Chris Cooper did not like Futuro Beach, a gay romantic drama. I'll put his review up on our email. You write to me at andyhum@AOL, and we'll send it to you.
Okay. I think we are about out of time. If your free speech is in pledge mode through March 22nd, so our viewings are limited. Check their schedule. Saturday 11 p.m., Sunday 1 p.m. Eastern. And we will see you right here next week